Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Cannacation. This is, I believe, the 7th episode of Cannacation. And this is a show where you can expect us to talk about the politics, the research, and basically marijuana as a whole and the future of marijuana. And, you know, we love discussing that thing. Welcome to a very late episode of Cannacation. Today we're going to be discussing the marketing, branding, and PTSD with Richard Cranor from Starleaf. Which, Richard, are you there? Oh, I'm not hearing him. Are you coming through? Can I hear you now? Oh, there he is. I hear him now.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome. So
we hearing each other?
Give yourself a little introduction. Tell people what you do, the film that you made, your branding company, all the great stuff.
Yeah. So my name is Richard Cranor. A couple years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I made a film called Starleaf, and Starleaf is a film about two Marines who go looking for some extraterrestrial weed growing up in the Olympic Mountains to cure their PTSD. So I shot that a couple years ago. We found a grower in Bainbridge Island to get us some plants, because I realized when I was trying to make this film, I was probably going to need to actually have some actual weed plants. I called up Hollywood, and I asked, you know, what would it cost to get an authentic looking marijuana plant? It's like $400 a plant, and I was just like, well, I'm just better off growing actual weed. Because the other thing was, the other idea was, well, you know, I had a brother who had PTSD. He came back from Iraq with PTSD. I had cancer 6 years ago as well. So I kind of got into the alternative medical and spirituality circles from those experiences. And so I became sort of fascinated with cannabis, even though at the time I didn't really smoke it. It was more for just I started doing the research on it. I started looking at the history on it and realized the only reason why it was illegal is because it posed a threat to certain people's and certain forces, economic forces in our society. So I felt like it was a unique opportunity to make a film about something of substance, and yet if we were to grow actual weed plants, you know, maybe I could turn it into a strain for PTSD, or perhaps create medicine in the long run, and create a brand out of all this that would go on and accomplish that goal. So that's kind of how it all started. It was just me, just like if you've ever seen Field of Dreams with Kevin Costner, where he goes out and he starts hearing voices, and he goes out in his cornfield and he builds a baseball diamond, and pretty soon he's got you know, these guys showing up in his backyard. It was kind of the same thing for me. I built my own little garden of weed out there in the woods, and within a couple of months I had an investor, and I had the movie, and eventually we got into actually creating a corporation, or a Starleaf Enterprises, which is the division that we now have that's in charge of basically creating the cannabis branding products and getting them out to market. So now we have a film, and now we have cannabis strains now that we're launching with Buddy Boy Farms out of Eastern Washington. So that's pretty exciting. And we have a beer. I have a buddy who liked the movie, and he's a brewer in Mill Creek, Washington, and he brewed a batch of Starleaf Black IPA. So now we're in the beer business, and the weed business, and the film business, and it's going pretty well. You know, we're still in our infancy, but we're getting some footholds in a pretty tough industry to actually get anything done in terms of the amount of legal hoops you got to jump through.
But, yeah, you have to be damn near a gymnast to be able to get through all those hoops. But so let me get this right. I can now smoke Starleaf weed while drinking Starleaf beer while watching the Starleaf movie. Is that right?
Yeah, it's pretty. I don't know how. It's pretty overwhelming, right? Sitting on the couch with all these things coming at you. Let's hope we get like a sequel coming too by next year. So yeah, that's it. We're a trifecta right now, and we're trying to expand this other things, time and resource permitting.
That's awesome. So you said that
Yeah.
PTSD, your brother coming back, and then your own experiences with cancer were kind of like the inspiration behind making the movie. Do you think? Because everybody, like, whenever you're doing something, like whenever I write an article or I make a video, I feel like I learn a little something about myself
Yeah.
in the process. Do you feel like you had any lessons that took away after making the movie versus what you were trying to state before the movie?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the things I always share with people is when I was actually growing these plants. I had to grow these plants, and I knew nothing about growing anything. So I had to go out into the woods. It was an outdoor grow. I had 30 plants, and I had to grow these marijuana plants. And so, I had grown. There had been a stigma to these plants my whole life. I inherited from my own family, the culture we all live in. And so at one point, probably like the third month into it, plants had gotten pretty tall and pretty big plants, and I was sitting out there in the woods, and I remember thinking, what's the big deal? They're plants that nature, God has provided for us, and if we've got problems abusing them, it's not the plant's problem. And so I just remember sitting with these plants, going, none of these plants are trying to harm me. They're not trying to make me worship Satan. They're just sitting there growing, and it's really sad. I remember thinking how sad it is that we're denied access to something so natural. So I think I kind of walked away from that, just with just an appreciation for just how much hypocrisy exists in our society, how much influence certain organizations and powers have over a populace, and it's pretty sad in some ways. So the film and the business is about, I think, trying to. I'm not saying you have to smoke weed to solve all your problems, but if you do smoke Starleaf, just kidding. But it should be there as an option, especially for like a lot of these vets who are often stuck with like horrible choices where they have to take a bunch of opiates and antidepressants, which don't always work. I feel like cannabis is this thing that does it accomplishes so many different tasks for people, important life tasks, things with, and if smoking a joint allows a soldier to come down a couple of notches in terms of their, escalation and how they're feeling and what they're thinking about doing, then it's successful. It doesn't have to cure everything right away. So I feel like that's just, the thing about Starleaf and the whole thing that we're trying to create. Our motto is explore the universe, explore all the things that, believe it or not, I think are being suppressed by suppressing the plant. And so, it's not the only thing you can use to explore the universe, but it's an important tool, I think, to have in the deck that you've got.
So could you say that, like, one of the things that you kind of learned through this is that besides, like, the fact that it helps with PTSD and everything, but that sitting there with the plant was kind of like a moment for you of realizing that we've been lied to. And you say specifically that there's powers that be that are out there. Let's delve into that a little bit, like, because this is something I talked about on the last show. I mean, with opioid usage dropping in states that have medical marijuana, with soldiers being able to use cannabis for PTSD instead of using opioids and heroin based products, you're seeing a huge drop in that. Now, big pharma is a $6.2 billion a year industry, most of that being with opioids. Do you think that's the main group that we have to fight against, or do you think that there's others out there as well that have a financial interest in it staying illegal?
Well, one thing I want to just briefly share with everybody that I think is a profound fact is that if the marijuana laws we have on the books right now were being enforced in 1776, most of our founding fathers would be in federal prison. I mean, just so you know, like, if you're out there hating that weed because it's what the communists trying to push on those young kids, just so you know, just about every president we've had, the founding fathers, would be in a federal prison if the laws in the books right now are being enforced in 1776. So that should tell you a lot about what's happened and what's changed and how wrong it is. I think Big Pharma is the number one problem. The whole Marijuana Act was, I can't remember, I think it was the DuPonts and some people in the textile industry that drove that legislation to try and really demonize weed usage and get it off, stop American farmers from growing hemp. But I think it's morphed now into mostly the big pharma range. And, my thing is I'm not totally against using opiates and opioids. I mean, if you have lost a limb, morphine is probably going to help you a lot. But the fact that they don't allow, the free choice, and being able to have access to something that you could grow for free, and if you're on a budget, and also has a lot less side effects. I mean, when you watch these people on the internet smoking weed who've got Parkinson's, I mean, they're trading, one joint for 6 different medications. I mean, that's a smarter way to do your health right. So I think it's mostly big pharma. I mean, I think the DEA makes a lot of money, and the prison industry makes a lot of money putting people in jail for marijuana. I mean, I still think, I can't remember what the exact number is, but that number is up there. Like 60% of drug cases still are cannabis. So if they
non-violent cannabis users.
Right. If they lose that money train, that's going to be pretty rough on those guys in the DEA, So I think that's, unfortunately, we live in a for-profit society. We develop mechanisms to extract profit, and we depend upon exploitation, and we depend upon criminalizing something. Yeah. Whether it's benign or not, it doesn't matter. So once you got that much money churning through it, that's why the feds to this day are still struggling to figure out what they're going to do, because the states are like, shit, this is working out really well, Well,
it seems like with the I was going to say, it seems like with the pharmacy industry, it's the only place that you actually see trickle-down economics really work. So the pharmacy is making, the big pharma is making all this money, right, which in turn makes the DEA money, right, because of all their seizures and civil forfeitures, which in turn makes the private industrial prison complex money, because then they get paid to keep all those people in prison, right, which then in turn makes other government agencies money, because then they have to take care of these people on parole, halfway houses. They have to go to drug rehab for smoking weed. Yeah. And then what's even funnier is, because you bring it up that, these soldiers aren't allowed to use it for their PTSD or, try to get off these opioids. They're saying that at 18, you're old enough to know if you want to go to war or not, but you're still not old enough to know if you want to drink. And then even after 21, okay, well, you're old enough to know if you want to put this poison into your body to get drunk. But you're not old enough to know if you want to use a non-psychoactive CBD to treat your disease or your condition. And it's just ironic that we're seeing this this crony capitalism happening from the pharmacy side of things and the business side of things, to the inconsistent logic behind allowing someone to die for their country, but not allowing them to put a non-psychoactive, CBD product into their body. What's your take on that a little bit? Do you think that's by design, or that's just because of the fear that's been bred over the last 40 years?
Unfortunately, good people suffer from indoctrination very well. One thing that I've learned, I think back to that experience I had when I was in the woods with these plants, is I realized how much I had suffered from indoctrination. I mean, there's pros and cons to everything in life. I mean, the sun gives us life, and it also gives us skin cancer, So we've lived a life where our big brother government has really conditioned us in a lot of ways to think very specifically about certain things that are a threat to its way of doing business. And so we've become reduced to just economic factors in a society or in a life that is I think there's a lot more at stake, in our personal lives. There's a lot more things that matter to us than being part of somebody's economic model, which is corrupt in general. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, like for me personally, I just want to see us getting past this conditioning. And it's tough, though, because we've just been so systemically ingrained over time that think that drugs are bad. And, things like the funny thing is, they've done research lately on psilocybin and some of these psychedelics along with cannabis. And these drugs are really helping people. They're helping people get over this stuff. And when you talk about PTSD, when you send someone to war and you told them to kill and they've done it, I think those people are entitled to do whatever it takes to get better, and if you have no right as a government at all to come in there after you've had someone do those kinds of things and say to them, well, this is the arbitrary thing that we're going to make you do based upon somebody else's economic model. So we as a society kind of figure out, where are we being economically, hijacked, where we're being economically leveraged, because that is really the source of almost all of our ills, in my opinion. And weed is a big poster child for it, because it's a powerful medicine, that exists in nature. And yeah, I'm sure you can abuse it like anything else, but it offers so much potential. Just the upside is so huge, especially when you compare it with the pharmaceutical meds, in terms of its natural ability to cure and help with so many things. We just have to start shaking that conditioning. I met a guy in Colorado who was airborne. I think he was airborne, and he was sneaking through the back door of a dispensary, and we stopped him because I was going in there to talk about Starleaf, and it turns out that he was trying to sneak in to get his weed, because his wife is like, whatever you're taking, whatever these guys at the VA gave you, whatever pills they gave you, it's making you miserable. Like, you need to go get that weed, because it was working. It was keeping your finger off the trigger, and that was success. So I don't know. In real life, I've seen the benefits, and I still think, though, unfortunately, there's guys like Jeff Sessions. There's still an old guard of people out there who just have been indoctrinated, and that indoctrination is pretty severe. I don't think we realize just how much we've been lied to and emotionally conditioned to think the ways we do. So we have to get past that. And I think education is the most important thing, getting over the stigma of it, realizing you don't have to smoke it every day if you don't want, but fuck, if I ever get serious pain, if I ever get Crohn's disease, if I start getting Parkinson's, I'm smoking weed.
Yeah.
Just saying.
No, you're not wrong. Well, it's funny that you bring up Jeff Sessions, and because there was actually this meeting recently with a whole bunch of Republicans that I actually talked about on the last show. And it was really interesting, because what they were complaining about is that they were losing the war against cannabis because there wasn't any research to support their claims. And so now you got the Republicans that are actually asking for more research, because they want research that tells them that marijuana is bad, right? And they have none whatsoever, but at least they're asking for the research. And as long as it's coming from an open and honest source, I mean, let's be honest, they're not going to get the research that they think they're going to get. And what I find absolutely hysterical is, Jeff Sessions in particular, the man who said that good people don't smoke weed, is now saying, well, okay, there might be some medical benefits to it, especially on the non-psychoactive side. So what I think we're seeing is the old guard, we're seeing its death throes, if you will, at least when it comes to cannabis, because they can no longer, even with their own people, justify their stance, because even they go, well, we think cannabis is bad, but we have no research whatsoever to back that up. And I just find that absolutely interesting.
What's crazy is that hemp was our number one product. I believe it was our number one agricultural crop up until the 30s,
Yep.
And it was such a huge factor in our economy. And so it was pretty common to have weed growing everywhere in this country. The thing about what you're saying, though, that I think is interesting, is I actually met one of the head researchers for THC trials back in the 70s when Nixon first he started doing this research in the 70s to try and prove how bad of a drug marijuana was, because he wanted leverage against the hippie movement, basically. Yep. So this is back when they actually filed those patents. I think that a lot of people know this now, but the federal government has 2 patents on, I believe, CBDs and THC. So if they thought it was a terrible drug, why were they, patenting it for health benefits later? Anyway, this guy actually told me some stories about, he's a psychotherapist now, but he was a researcher back in the 70s of injecting THC into rats and getting calls from Nixon's people asking, so what happened to the rats? What happened to the rats? Are they biting each other's heads off? What's going on? And he's like, actually, they're just sort of like helping each other find their way through the maze. They're sharing cheese. They're not doing anything. Not doing anything crazy right now. They're singing Kumbaya, fine. And pretty soon the phone calls. They're helping each other
when they get lost and sharing their Cheetos.
Sharing Cheetos is the way you get through the maze, buddy. It's over here, seriously, like the rats were more cohesive social unit. So eventually the Nixon people just stopped calling them. They're like, shit, like it's not the devil's drug after all. So, I think weed, one thing about weed I'll say is that I think Bob Marley has this quote, like, it's the plan will introduce yourself to yourself. And when I smoke it, I don't always smoke it in social situations because I actually get very introspective when I smoke it. But I think that's good work to do, you know. And so I don't know. I just think at the end of the day, we have to have the freedom to choose, and there shouldn't be to remove the economic dynasties that are set up now that still want to maintain an old order. But like you're saying, it is kind of dying. My mom called me up from, she's from Alabama and very religious, and all of a sudden now that her arthritis is acting up on her hands, she's asking me about CBD oil, you know. So that's how in long term I think this plays out, because the only thing I'm worried about is just some massive draconian federal clampdown that could happen, but I think that would lead to a serious problem with the states, because the states now realize that this is the best way forward for them in terms of the tax revenue, and that kind of thing. So, I think that the air is kind of coming out of the balloon. The bag is being released slowly. People are starting to realize that this has been a big hoodwink, that's been done to the American
What I love about it is that it's turned into kind of like a wake-up call. I mean, people are going, well, crap, if they've been lying to us about this, what else are they lying to us about? If they're trying to control this part of our lives and it's beneficial, what other part of our lives are they controlling where they're making it less beneficial than it could be? Real quick, though, it's funny that you brought up the psilocybin and such, because I've actually been looking into this research about the endocannabinoid system and how, our bodies actually need cannabinoids to feed itself and properly stay cancer-free and regeneration of cells and all this stuff. They actually think that mushrooms, psilocybin in particular, and cannabis, we evolved along with it, and that it actually might have had something to do with our evolution of conscious thought. That we went from, Australopithecus, which was, kind of an unthinking, but it used tools. And then with the advent of cannabis and psilocybin, started evolving towards more rational and communicative thought, where the before hominids even showed up, these Australopithecus, I know I'm murdering that word, but like these people, they started forming societies, and we're starting to find structures, not man-built because they're not hominids, but humanoid-style buildings from these eras. And but the thing that they say is that this requires, for those tools to get made, for those buildings to be built, it required communication. It required not necessarily written language, but at least a verbal one of some sort. And they're actually finding that ever since we, stopped taking cannabis, like 40 years ago on the regular, because we had it in our cough syrups, we had it in, so many things, and we started making it illegal, cancer rates spiked. And they're actually finding now that if you feed your endocannabinoid system with cannabinoids, it feeds the cancer, which is what the cancer is looking for, which is why it spreads through the body. It's looking for those cannabinoids throughout the body, and that's why it grows. So counterintuitively, that when you feed it those cannabinoids, it'll shrink and go back to its natural state. So it's interesting that in the short period of time, if this is true, because more research has to be done on it, obviously, but if this isn't true, in the short period of time, the 40, 50 years in which we've kept it illegal and kept it out of our bodies, that our bodies have reacted so horridly to not having it in their system. So I think that, like I said, this is interesting because the old guard has no argument. At this point, the curtain has been pulled. We've seen that the character of Oz is just a man blowing smoke up our butt, and that this is inevitable at this point. Yeah, I do kind of fear some draconian federal stuff, but I mean, it'd be really, really dumb for them to do that at this point. I mean, with all the real issues that we have, like the police shootings and the racism and the new alt-right crap. Do you really want to start a civil war over pot? Like, out of all the reasons that they have chilling on the sidelines, do you really want to go that route?
No. I mean, right now we're at a time in human history where I think a lot of things are coming to a head. A lot of the shadow side of our culture, of our being, is being exposed. So it's a good thing that that's happening, but it's a chaotic thing, and that's where I think the more people can sort of tune in to their higher selves and each other's higher selves, we can navigate this better. And there's no, whether it's meditation, yoga, cannabis, psilocybin, I think all of these things expand your frequency bandwidth. Like what you're saying basically is, and this is a theory that a lot of people have now, is that, our frequency bandwidth has been narrowed. And then when it gets narrowed, it gets more desperate. And in your cave, and when you constantly exacerbate and stroke some of the worst aspects of our nature, which are necessary, like the primal of aggression that we have, the instincts for survival, for sex, those are all important instincts. But our culture, especially an economically dominant one that we have now, that's trying to always, exploit in some way ourselves in these natural features, it just overstimulates it all. But I think when you're taking cannabis, when you're healthier, when your foods aren't GMO, you're basically tuning into your physical body can tune in to the frequency spectrum of consciousness better. And so I think, like you're saying, over time that we've been deprived of these nutrients, our frequency spectrum is narrowed and we become more desperate. So the more we have access to this stuff, and just like our ancestors probably were out there running around somewhere in the Sahara, whatever, they started munching on some weed that was growing or some psilocybin, it was like a chemical gateway opens up in their brain for an expansion to happen. And I think we have been deprived of that. So there's many different ways to get to where we need to go. But I think having access to these plants is our inheritance, first of all. It shouldn't be deprived of us anyway. And we need to have access to them, because I do really think that it, like you're saying, our ability to see ourselves and our future, it gets narrowed, chemically,
Absolutely.
biologically.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I actually have, this is my pet theory, right? I don't have any real, data to go behind this. It's just something that I've kicked around. And I think in the last 200 or 300 years, we've removed ourselves from evolution. We're no longer really all that affected by our environment. We terraform the areas we live in. I mean, 400 years ago, none of us would have thought of living in a desert. That's just ridiculous. Florida didn't become popular until about 50 years ago, because nobody wanted to live in such a hot hellhole. You know what I mean? We've removed ourselves from this, and it's had its consequences. I mean, I'm not a social Darwinist. I don't think we should just take all the warning labels off of everything and let the problem sort itself out. But I do think at the same time that we need to recognize that we're not separate from nature. We're not of a different world. Some people think, oh, well, we were seeded by aliens. I think Gaia is our mother, and this is where we came from. And if we are arrogant enough to separate ourselves from that, we're going to see the same problems we do when we separate ourselves from cannabinoids. We're going to see our bodies break down. We're going to see our spirituality break down, and eventually we'll see our societies break down. And I think that cannabis, at least, is a first small step into moving ourselves back into the evolutionary chain of things. And so hopefully, we'll see a rise in consciousness, like you said, or a widening of our frequencies, and being able to hopefully, start living naturally along with our intelligence, not putting our intelligence first, you know what I mean, but putting it at least equal with nature. But speaking of which, because we're getting ready to wrap up your interview here, but I wanted to talk about some of the side projects that I've seen you on. Like, you recently went to a mountain that had weird light phenomenon, and you've been kind of diving into the supernatural, if you will. You want to break that down a little bit?
Yeah. So I've had friends for a while telling me about this mountain, Mount Adams. Everyone knows Mount Adams, but there's a ranch nearby called the East Seti Ranch. And they were telling me, if you go to this ranch, you're going to see UFOs. And I'm like, whatever, this is going to be ridiculous. It's going to be a bunch of hippies with the laser pointers pointing at the sky, chasing satellites. I've seen it before. But I go there, and I shit you not, man. I saw 3 UFOs. I saw these orbs floating around. I mean, I'm not talking about dust specks. I'm talking freaking sheets of light moving through the day sky, not night. And it freaked me out. And then I know the part that's the weirdest part, and I hate to admit this to everyone, but I already made a video about it. But it is weird. I woke up one morning listening to a loud mammal make this woo, 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 woo. It was just the weirdest freaking sound I've ever heard in my life. It was startling. And the coyotes nearby started freaking out. And then I go home and I started Googling, okay, well, what makes a weird sound in the Pacific Northwest like that? Was it an owl? Was it a coyote? Was it a bear? Was it whatever? Didn't find anything except a couple recordings of people of Bigfoot, apparently. So I think I might have heard of Bigfoot. So all I'm saying is, if you want a decent bang for your buck and you're looking for something in the paranormal world, I'd check out this ranch. I think you would be surprised. I mean, there was still the phenomenon of people thinking that they saw UFOs and they were just satellites. I mean, there was that. But the UFOs that I saw, I ain't never seen anything like that in my life. And it was pretty profound. So my path with Starleaf has been about exploring the unknown, exploring these different forces at work. And I do feel that there are forces both benign in our inner self and outer self, and negative. And I feel like we're at a point in our human evolution where there has been, I think, a concerted effort by some negative forces trying to use us in some way. And I haven't quite figured all that out. I don't think we can get into it now. But I do feel part of the fight back to take back our destiny and our true selves is it's starting to take on a pretty good momentum right now. And then the more we explore our universe, however we can, whether it's through cannabis, whether it's through trips to this ranch, it helps because you get a better view of what's really going on. And that's the important thing, not to be dumbed down with antidepressants and shit food and trauma, and try to get past that through whatever self-nurturing you can, whatever help you can get from your bigger community, and find out what the truth really is. I think that's what we're all forced to do right now if you really want to be happy at some point and free.
That's awesome, man. So you started off making a movie about pot. It evolved into breaking down social stigmas and looking into PTSD and the effects of that. That led you to branding and growing your own marijuana and also branding other people's. What was the farm again that you're doing?
The farm is Buddy Boy Farms out of Ford, Washington. They're an organic grower. They've got a ton of greenhouses and they make pretty good weed. So we're pretty excited to have them aboard.
So then that grows on forward into looking into the paranormal, consciousness, awareness, evolution. I mean, that is quite the journey to take over, the path of 2 to 3 years. I mean, most people have to pay lots of money and go to Tibet for that kind of journey.
Just go to Mount Adams. I got to go find that Bigfoot though and get him for the sequel, the Starleaf. Man, I tell you, that'd be pretty awesome to have him cast. We'll see what I can do. I'll see if I can't find him.
You got to ask him if he's driving those UFOs too. I mean, is the phenomenon connected? Is Bigfoot really an alien race come down to study us? You
know what's weird about all that? I don't know how much time we have. I'll make it quick. But according from what I saw there was also these lights that were flashing on the mountain. They've been going on they've been documented for 100 years. And one of the theories is that it's hikers. And I'm like, there's no hiker on the top of Mount Adams at 2 a.m. Climbing a glacial peak. I mean, it's not what it is. It's probably what they call anonymous luminous phenomena, which is geomagnetic, earthquake lights, that kind of thing. But I think what that area is, it's some kind of porous place where the electromagnetic spectrum that we see through is a bit more porous. And we're kind of getting a glimpse at that place of other things just outside our electromagnetic spectrum. And Bigfoot might be something like that, where it's not quite physically incarnate. And on those woods, somehow in those mountains, there's something geomagnetic that's creating a bit of porousness to where the lines aren't so solid. I mean, if you think about it, we're just electrons spinning around in a certain configuration. We really, really want to break that all down. And they've never been able to figure out where our consciousness comes from anyway. That's a whole thing called the hard problem of consciousness. So, you walk into these things thinking this is all going to be a bunch of hippie bullshit. But if you spend enough time out there, you realize there's some validity to some of these theories once you're there to experience it firsthand. I mean, you're not going to believe it from anybody else. But if you go to it, it starts to kind of like open up. And so I don't know how to explain it. I don't know what Bigfoot really is. But I could see where there is some weird connection. The Northwest has a lot of weird stuff going on, man. We've got the first UFO sighting was at Mount Rainier, or Mount Adams, actually. So
that's interesting. And I wouldn't say just the Pacific Northwest. I mean, everything down to the Hopis in the Southwest of the United States. Pretty much the West. I mean, when I was studying shamanism back in my 20s, I noticed that. A lot of tribes would send their spiritual men west to go for their final tests or their final, their final ritual, if you will, to become a final shaman or a medicine man or whatever, their culture called it. And it's very interesting that they sent everyone sent them west. Like, hey, you just go into that desert and figure stuff out, and then come back and let us know what's going on. And then these theories and these spiritual beliefs had a lot of roots in science, and that we're starting to prove a lot of what they came up with true. But I digress. Tell everybody, where they can find you, where they can find your product, where they can buy your movie, and everything that you're going to be doing in the future.
So StarleafMovie.com is our main website, and Starleaf Movie on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, where you can probably find us interacting. Buddy Boy is going to have us in a bunch of stores here shortly. We're in 3 right now, one in Clear Choice Cannabis in Tacoma is our big store, and we also have 2 stores in Bremerton at the Philabong. But we're going to be expanding here by the end of the month into a lot more stores. So Washington State's going to have a lot of Starleaf coming its way here probably by the end of, what month is this? What month are we in? This is October?
Yeah.
So November. So I'm losing track. I'm in another, my brain travels interdimensionally sometimes. So it doesn't always come back. So by the end of November, we should probably be in as many cities as we possibly can in Washington State. So I'm looking forward to that. And so basically StarleafMovie.com. That's an Amazon. Starleaf Movie is actually on Amazon, on iTunes and YouTube and Google Play and most of the usual suspects. And for some reason, we're really popular in Indonesia. I haven't figured that one out yet. Oh, and then the Germans have a Blu-ray coming out for us. We're on this compilation called Smoke Flick. So if you want to watch Starleaf with some other German weed films, there's that.
Have a German weed film night, and drink your Starleaf beer while smoking your Starleaf weed,
It's a very German way to do things. Yeah, yeah.
Awesome, man. Thank you for coming on the show. I'm sorry that it was so late. But I always love interviewing you. And for all the viewers out there, we're actually going to be having a video coming out here soon at Hemp Fest, where you'll see Richard Cranor on that as well. And it's I love having him on, and he's always a hoot to talk about the random stuff nobody likes to bring up.
I do random pretty often.
I'll have to get you on this one podcast that's a friend of mine. He does, Baked and Awake. And so it's Weed and Conspiracy. And it's a really interesting podcast. We'll have to all get on it one day, do a round table with him.
That's right up my alley.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for coming on, Richard, man. I look forward to seeing more of you in the future, man.
Great talking to you, Robert. Seriously.
All right.
Good work.
Hey, you have a great day. All right, guys, that was Richard Cranor. I got to switch over here. Let me move from those beds to these buds. That was Richard Cranor, good friend of mine. He grows, he brands, he makes movies. He's an all-around entrepreneur. It's great to see him succeeding in the industry. It makes me happy. So normally this is where I would get into the news, but we're running well behind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip right into the reviews of the utilitarian review. Today, let's start with the flower first. Today, I'm going to have Koala Canyon XJ13 Top Secret. Take a look right there at the jar and the packaging. I like the packaging. It's definitely got a unique feel to it. I like the Top Secret oil there. Let me open this up and I'll show you some of the flower as well. Pull that out. Let's take a look here. Ooh, put this here. You guys can see that. Hope that's coming through for you. So this is the XJ13. I've smoked this strain quite a bit. It's definitely one of the more popular ones up here in the Pacific Northwest. For those who don't know, XJ13s is the name of the X-Wing fighters from Star Wars. Okay. I'm going to be honest, right off the bat, kind of has a hay smell to it, but you can definitely smell a little bit of sweet undertones to it. Let me crack a nugget open to really get it. Ooh, it has like a peppermint smell or a spearmint, definitely a mint kind of smell in the center of it, but it does kind of have a little bit of a hay smell to it if you don't crack the nugget open. So let me see here. Throw this in. Do a quick little review on this. So this is XJ13 from Koala Canyon. You can check them out, koalacanyon.com. Giving it a smoke right now. Ooh, right off the rip, it's a little harsh. Real pinchy in the throat right here. Like, you know, the center of your throat where it kind of grabs up. Let me take another hit for the flavor. Not much flavor to it. I can't really, and none of that peppermint smell that I had translated over. I mean, it doesn't taste bad. You don't have, like, I was expecting it to be like hay, but it didn't. It doesn't have that hay kind of smell to it. Like I said, it is kind of harsh. But it's not making me cough. It kind of makes me want to cough. Like I could cough, but I mean, it's not forcing me to cough, which is better than just kind of coughing or wanting to cough. So, yeah, not much flavor to it. A little harsh. What's the high like? Well, let me take another hit and I'll tell you. So, like most XJ13s that I've smoked, it's definitely a hybrid. You can kind of tell in the high, you know, it's not incredibly like, but it's not jump up and do your dishes either. It's definitely what I like to call high school high. You know, the old school kind of stony, watching Wayne's World with your eyes half cocked, you know, kind of high, which, you know, isn't bad. XJ13 isn't one of my favorites, only because I tend not to like hybrids. I like my stuff to lean one way or the other. Like I either want it to be a sativa or I want it to be an indica. But, you know, hybrids, I'm like, there's too much, right? But it's definitely, it is a relax high. Like if I was going to do this, my utilitarian review for this is I would sit down, watch TV, play video games, or read a book, go outside, lay out in the sun while we still have some. These are all things I would do on this utilitarian review for that. So moving on to the dabs, we have Soul extracts here. This is Girl Scout Cookie, BHO. Testing at, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you the test of the XJ13. Let me tell you that real quick. Yeah, I don't see a test on this thing. Oh, there it is. 22.2% THC with no CBDs. So, but total cannabinoids 25.6. I don't make a lick of sense. Okay, so going back to Cannasol Soul extracts, right? These guys, the Girl Scout cookies, BHO testing at 75% THC, 0.7% CBD, and it says other CBNs, but it says 0, so obviously not in there. Take a look at their packaging. I like it. It's a little over packaged. Here, let me stop moving. In my opinion, like I have a feeling I'm gonna have a problem opening this. That's what I'm saying here. But you know, over packaging isn't bad. I mean, it catches the eye. I like their little logo, Soul extracts, little pot leaves on it. It's good. So let's see how difficult this is to open. Well, yeah, it's difficult. So it's one of these ones that like kind of fold over. Let me see if I can get this. How to open marijuana with Robert Wasman. Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay, so it's not that bad after you can get it open. But like what I see what I said about the, I don't know if you can see this, but see how you have to peel it like that, little over packaging. You know, I mean, I get it. It's probably an LCB regulation, knowing them. So let's put this dabs into the camera so you can actually see the dabs itself. So it looks good. Nice blonde. Looks like it has like a sugary consistency. But I'll find out here in a second. And yeah, it looks pretty good. Let's give it a sniff. Yeah, it definitely smells like Girl Scout cookies. Definitely has that sweet butter, like cookies. smell. So let's see the consistency here. It's definitely got a sugar wax. Not as sugary as the I don't know if you guys watched the last week's episode where I had Orange State's terp wax. It's not that sugary, but it's still got that that butter, cakey kind of cake butter kind of feel to it. So this is Girl Scout Cookies BHO, 75% THC from Cannasol Soul Extracts. Tasty, very tasty. A lot of terpenes. Excuse me. A lot of terpenes do it. Quick onset. Girl Scout cookies tend to be a hybrid. I think it leans a little bit more to the sativa side of things, which I can immediately feel. Bam, in the head. Talkative. I'm already uppity. I'm already getting kind of antsy in my seat. But it's not fidgety. So it's not like something I would smoke and then do manual labor. This is more of like a smoke and then like easy labor, like taking strolls or, working on a computer, working in a small garden, not like in a large one, like hobby style work, puzzles, building those friggin' model cars and stuff like that. So this is it's a doer. It's a doer weed, if you will. I would do stuff on this. It's pretty good. Yeah, I'd buy this. Yeah. This gets a big old thumbs up from me. I would definitely buy this and smoke it again. So that was the utilitarian review. Now we're to the part of the show that I like to call cached. This usually is where I tell you, what did we learn today? Well, normally I'd have a whole list of research to talk to you about what we learned, but instead, what we learned today is that the journey of cannabis can be an eye-opening one. This man set out just to make a movie and ended up having some wonderful undertones about PTSD during the development of the movie. He had to grow marijuana and he saw like how harmless it really was and how indoctrinated that he was. And then he had to break through his own stigmas and do his own research to get through that. Then it moved on to a branding issue. It moved up to where where he's actually making a business out of it. Now, and then this is all in the span of 2-3 years. I mean, I myself can even talk about how my journey through. So I moved to Washington about 3 years ago. Immediately got a job at a recreational shop. They taught me so much. I have so much, debt to that company. But they taught me how to grow. They taught me how to sell. They taught me, dude, I barely knew the difference between an indica and a sativa when I moved here. I thought I was a master grower because I grew in Florida, where like literally your growing skills are throw it in the ground and leave it alone for 6 months. I had to come here. I had to learn about moisture levels and, oh man, terpenes, cannabinoids, CBDs, CBNs, CBDAs, THCAs, non-psychoactive, psychoactive, and it was this huge journey. I went from just wanting to be a dude who sold pot to wanting to be a guy who educated those who don't understand it. And that includes smokers and non-smokers alike. Because let's be honest, some of you smokers don't do all your research. I wanted to educate and inspire people to get involved. I mean, because this industry is budding. Oh God, I hate that pun. I'm sorry. This industry is growing, and it's very new. I mean, think about it. There's only like 4 or 5 states that have recreational legalities in their states, and eventually it's going to move to all states, all 50 states. This is going to happen. If you're in the industry now, imagine when it's that large. Imagine where you'll be. I mean, you watching this right now, sitting there, you with the joint in your mouth. Yeah, you You have the opportunity to be a footnote in history about cannabis and its resurgence into the human story. And that's all I wanted to be a part of. I just wanted to be a part of that story. So thank you guys for watching the show. Sorry for being so late. I'll make sure not to be next week. Remember, we will always tell you the truth. We will always research the truth. Thank you, and keep growing.